Good evening, everybody. We're going to get it started. So, today is Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. It's 6 p.m. We're at the Public Safety Center, and I call the City Commission special meeting to order. Commissioners present are Commissioners Duval, Commissioner Langdon, Mayor Stokes, Vice Mayor Emmerich, and Commissioner Petro. There's a quorum present for the meeting. Also present, City Manager Fletcher, Interim City Attorney Golan, City Clerk Faust, Police Chief Garrison, and Fire Chief Titus. Let us see. Lance, would you kindly lead us in the pledge? All righty. City Clerk, any public comments?
This is information from the CAFR 2023, which is Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which is a law in Florida, and the City of Norfolk must do it annually. First bullet, the asset and defer outflow of resources of City of Norfolk exceed its liabilities and defer inflows of resources at the close of the fiscal year 2023 by $696 million. This is the net position. Of this amount, 499 million represent net investment in capital assets, what it's called capital asset net of related debt. 161 million is restricted for specific purposes, what it's called restricted net position, and the remaining portion represent unrestricted net position of 34 million plus. The total net position increased by 71 million during the year compared to 39 million previous year 2022. Total revenue were 294 million, which was 108 million more or 58% higher than year 2022. Total expenses were 222 million, an increase of 75 million. At close of fiscal year 2023, the city governmental funds reported combined ending balance 174 million, an increase of 16 million in net with prior year. At close fiscal year 2023, unassigned fund balances for general fund was 22 million or 34% of total general expenditures. There is no need for bonds. You have too much money in your pocket. This is my comment. You have more money which you don't use. If you don't have a room for storage, this is the way to store these days. You don't need to build buildings. And my final comment is related to the police department. This is from I copied it. It states that calls for service in 2022 were 78,428. 46,200, which is 59%, were policemen called back to the headquarters. So the next line says calls per resident. Of course, they include numbers which cops call headquarters, not the citizen. Did you guys can figure out this for change? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olner. All right. moving on to general business. We'll have city manager introduce this. Then we're going to move through each of the referendum items one by one. We'll open them up for questions and answers, and and move right through all five. So with that, I'll turn it over, city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We want to thank everyone for coming out and thank you for hosting and having this group here today. I think everyone recognizes that we are having 5 questions on the referendum on special election on May 13th. We hope you visit our website to get as much information so that you can make your decision on that date. As it relates to the questions that are in front of us, we talk about emergency borrowing, what it means and why. We talk about the residency requirements of our city attorney as well as our city clerk. We also ask for your permission to secure general obligation bonds to build a new police headquarters. That is the cheapest way possible to build the headquarters, which we have outlined the need with the designs that we have, as well as the way that we need to make sure our police has what they need to be successful. Also on the ballot are questions regarding a solid waste transfer station as well as a effluent pumping station. We hope that you read this information, but we're here and thank the commission and myself and my team are here to answer questions as needed. But we hope that you get all the information that you need to make the decision that you want on May 13th. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. First item up is 25-1926. It's a discussion regarding referendum question relating to city borrowing authority for response to declared emergencies with public question and answer session. You want to introduce this one?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this question specifically talks about the borrowing authority for disaster recovery. We had this question, a similar version of it on the ballot last November, and it was combined with a need for infrastructure that was failing for critical public health and safety items, and it did not pass. We were told, and we listened to the people who voted and said that we should have broken it up and not combined the two, which is what we did. So now the question to you, before you on this case is, can we borrow for emergency purposes? When we had Hurricane Ian, we had enough money to sustain the city. So it's not one hurricane that we're concerned about, it's multiple. We know last year there were multiple hurricanes with Debbie, Helene, and Milton. And thankfully, the city of Northport was not severely impacted by any of them. But if all three of them had impacted us without the ability to borrow, we would have been in a very bad situation for the city of Northport. And we're trying to avoid that in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All righty. With that, whoever wants to ask questions, one at a time, come up,
Thank you.
speak clear into that mic, and we'll see
Yeah,
what we can do.
thank you. Thank you for clarifying the difference between the November general and this one. So I think that the concern that many people have is that the people aren't going to be able to vote. And I think that people have, can you clarify that part? Because what I read in the referendum was saying that if this goes through, then the people are not going to be able to, I mean, you all make the decision, but not the people. And I think that the people need to be able to make that decision.
So we are the only, Mr. Mayor, am I okay to answer?
Sure, go ahead.
We're the only city in the
Right,
state that
in the
does
state
not
of
have this
Florida.
authority.
Yep.
So you having the right to vote on projects that we can maintain without asking you is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to circumvent your authority in the borrowing process. This right here will allow us to take care of needs without going to you every single time and waiting for
Oh,
a
I don't
vote to get
mind.
it done. Yeah, you may not mind, but the longer we wait to get certain projects done, the more that it costs. And if we're all concerned about saving taxpayers' dollars, speed and time is an important
Yeah,
factor.
it's right. I mean, we know what's going on from state level
Right.
and from a federal level with Doge and trying to cut. And so it's just the way it's written and perceived. And I'm just bringing that to your attention because the way it's written, I would say no, but yet I do support and back the blue. I do support the waste. There's other things that I totally support. It's just that is that one is just a concern. So just wanted to
Maybe
bring that to your attention.
maybe it could help a little to realize when we do experience a declared emergency, obviously there's debris everywhere, there's damage to
Mhm.
structures and infrastructure, and the ability to get it cleaned up in a timely fashion is important. State and federal government offers low and no interest loans, many of which are actually forgivable, but there's a window of opportunity to apply for those loans. If we have to go out and ask the citizens for the permission to borrow, and borrowing those funds requires, according to our charter, permission, we missed that window of opportunity. That's why we thought if we narrowed the scope of this to only declared emergencies and for debris removal and the repair or restoration of those infrastructure projects or those infrastructure
Mhm.
facilities that were damaged or destroyed, people would get comfortable with that because obviously they're going to impact all our citizens. And we miss out on that opportunity.
And I know other people have questions, so last question to that note, and thank you for clarifying some of that into more detail. So who declares the emergency? Where is that authority? Is that for proceeding with something like that and giving you all the authority to take out those interest-free loans, for example? I mean, is that declared by the state declares it? I know the governor just declares it, but do you all have some authority in Northport? I've just returned to my home state,
Yeah.
so I'm just
There actually, there are federal and state guidelines for declared emergencies, and the city typically follows suit with those.
okay,
So commission would vote to declare that emergency based on the guidelines established by state and federal.
okay,
So
all
it's
right.
pretty structured,
Yeah,
pretty
I
structured.
believe me, I know. Thank you,
Can I,
appreciate it.
Thank
can
you.
I add one more thing before you sit down, ma'am?
Sure.
To give you an example, the projects that are on this referendum, the headquarters
Yeah,
and the station, you voting yes for this will not allow us to do any of that without coming back to you for your vote in the future. So it doesn't give us the right to build a new headquarters anywhere or a transfer station. They still have to come back to you because those aren't related to disaster recovery, which is what this question
right,
is related to.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Bell.
Is this on? Oh, I guess it is. Ma'am, um, I would like you to go home and look on your computer and look up FEMA, FEMA. And when there is an emergency, such as a hurricane, individual people can apply for FEMA loans, grants, but on every one of them, if you look up that information, it has a time limit. Okay, FEMA declares after each emergency how long you have to apply for those loans. And the problem with the city of Northport is that right now we do not have the ability to borrow any money unless we have a vote by the people. And the problem with that is that we only have a general election every 2 years. So if we have a hurricane this summer and there's a declared emergency and FEMA says, okay, we've got some loans, we've got some grants, the city of Northport doesn't have the time to apply for them because we got to wait until the election. I hope that makes it a little clearer. Can we call a special? You know, that's in order to, okay, anytime there is an election, first of all, we have to apply to the supervisor of elections. We don't just decide, hey, we want to have an election next month. Okay. The Board of Elections is the one that decides when we can have that election. Okay. And that might not coincide with the time limit that FEMA sets up for things.
All right. Sir, you are up.
Yes, I have one question. To the extent that the referenda are similar as to what they were in the last election. I'm curious, and I would like the commissioners to respond to this rather than the administrator, uh, as to what has changed since November. My thinking on it is the first reason we heard that something was split up. I'm not quite sure that was on the ballot, so I don't know how we know that's why we're having a special election. Okay. I hear you, and I think that perhaps elections just get in the way, and the people are bothersome to deal with. So, and I also think that the November election was fairly well. The populace of Northport was fairly well represented, and I don't think you're going to get that in a special election. So again, this I'd be very interested in you giving me or us all the reasons why something has changed since November, because I haven't heard one yet, other than the fact that there might be a hurricane tomorrow and we can't have a special election by tomorrow.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Langen?
Thank you, Mayor. What's different about this is in last November, we had one question and it combined emergency borrowing and then a general statement to borrow up to $15 million a project for any critical infrastructure project. And again, I think city manager mentioned it lost by 300 votes, which was actually fairly close. We did a lot of reaching out to the community to get feedback, and what we heard repeatedly was if you had separated out emergency borrowing and had identified some very specific infrastructure projects you wanted to extend bonds to fund, that it would have had, at least some of them, would have had a better chance of passing. So that's exactly what we've done. That young woman was very correct. We can call, or we can work with the supervisor of elections to have a special election. Again, the timetable is not ours, and it will cost us $130,000 to do it. So there's just a lot to this stuff.
Anyone else?
I'll go. Well, the November question was combined and loaded question. It contained two items, emergency and critical or capital improvement projects, 15 millions per each. So in essence, a lot of people, a lot of voters were hesitant to vote for that because it would be limitless borrowing, if you will. Well, this question specifically states that it's only for declared state, federal, local emergency. And that's the difference. And we, as a commission, decide if it's locally needed to be declared as an emergency. Now, I hear a lot of people say this is the city can issue debt for emergency recovery needs is limitless, will be limitless. Well, this is not true. In a way, like if you apply for your credit card, of potential credit card, they're not gonna give you limitless borrowing power, correct? And based on your income, so it's gonna be fairly limited. So that's another misconception that people have. But also why we doing this now and not wait till 2026, because we have two seasons of hurricanes. And if we have more than one, well, the Ian, I think, the hurricane, I think over 65 million was wiped out from our books. So basically, our own money, and we could not apply for a single dollar for low interest loans or for any grants for that matter, because we had no authority to borrow as a city. So to me, as most, I called myself the most financially um, conservative on financial side. I think it's basically a common sense to to have this because we're losing not just opportunity. And if we wait for the general election, we why to do this now? Because we don't want to put it every time because, like it was mentioned, each time we have a special election, we have to pay over $100,000. But it's better than $65 million in cleaning. So I think it's win-win for the city, and I'm part of the city, so I would not go against myself. So, and I'm not advocating for this. I'm just presenting it. I think it's a fair and logical thing to do. And this is I can speak on my by my I I think we're in consensus on that question for sure. So I speak for myself, for the city, and for the benefit of the entire city. So I think it's win-win for everybody.
The, the one other thing to bear in mind, as this young lady mentioned, why can't we just go out and you know, set up an election and ask permission? You could imagine if a significant storm hit our area and did devastating damage, just the ability to get an election up and running can take months. It took us months to do this May one. Are citizens really going to be willing to sit by and wait while they can't traverse roads through our city where bridges might be washed out, where mountains of debris exist? People would say, what is wrong with our elected officials that they didn't do something to prevent this? 411 communities in this state, and we're the only one that can't borrow money. So, okay, 65 years of experience in this city's citizens feel pretty good about the fact that they control the purse strings, and and we've accepted that when we ask for projects to be funded, we're going to need to come back again. But to build some trust, if there were one area that we would ask the citizens to give us some room on, it's this emergency borrowing. God forbid we get hit with back to back. We're going to have a heck of a time. And people aren't going to be thinking, well, gee, you know, um, we told them you have to ask us to go borrow the money. Instead, it's going to be, why don't you have things cleaned up? I can't get to work. I can't get my kids to school. I can't go to the doctor. And that's the kind of reality we face. All you have to do is go down to Fort Myers and Cape Coral and some of the other areas after some of these storms, and even Englewood now. How long after these storms? So, again, it's a very narrow borrowing request. And and the truth is, one thing that hadn't been mentioned is emergency borrowing like this is reimbursable. We're not talking about loans that are going to sit out there for 20, 30 years. We're talking 2, 3 years at tops till, well, till FEMA or some other entity, if the feds decide to push FEMA related responsibilities to the state level, they're, these kinds of natural disasters and the expenses are reimbursable. So we're talking pretty much short-term borrowings here, which should give everybody some comfort. We're not talking about long-term debt. We're just looking for the dollars to be able to get ourselves out from under a storm so our citizens can get their lives back in order.
Okay, I guess it's my turn.
Yes, it is.
Okay, Mr. Stokes, Commission, thank you guys for being here tonight. Uh, we just, the Governor DeSantis just came out and said that Doge, and wanted to see if we need to be Doge here in Northport, which is Department of Government Efficiency, and our city manager evidently replied, our city staff replied that we don't need that because we've never had an emergency. But now we gotta borrow money now because we're gonna have an emergency in the future. But in the past, we've never had an emergency, is what the city manager has said to reply to our governor DeSantis. So I'm just trying to figure out, now we got an emergency. We gotta borrow $15 million to cover expenses that we haven't even occurred yet. Up to $15 million, I should say. So I'm just trying to figure this out. We've never had an emergency by city manager, but now we have an emergency. We got to have a referendum to pass before we can spend money.
First of all, this has nothing to do with the $15 million limit that was on the ballot back in November. That's totally separate. Okay? This is for a declared emergency, federal, national, state. Back in November, the wording also included for certain safety projects, for the safety and health. Okay, that kind of left it nebulous. Nobody knew exactly what those were. Okay, that is not in this declared emergency referendum question this time. This is just for declared emergencies, for cleaning up the debris, and for repairing and reconstructing structures that were damaged as a result of that hurricane or whatever the emergency is.
Okay, so in Ian, we had no emergencies. Is what our city manager has pretty much told our governor of Florida, that we had no emergencies here in Northport to borrow anything. That's what I'm getting at.
Good evening. I'm Kim Williams. I'm the finance director for the city. So what the letter from Doge and the request, they were looking for cities that were in a state of financial emergency, which Northport has never been. So the question that they gave us where we replied no was, had we run a deficit fund balance in any major fund for 2 years in a row? And we've not, even in our road and drainage, we did not run a deficit fund balance. So that was why we answered like we did. We've never been in a state of emergency. We have had, obviously, natural disasters, emergencies related to that, but a state of financial emergency is different.
Okay, so so why do we got to put it on the referendum to borrow? I don't understand it.
Be,
We're
well,
gonna be fine,
it's to be prepared. As I said earlier,
Mr.
okay,
Stokes.
if we let me finish, if we have major storms, a couple of them, we would not have the money to clear the debris. We wouldn't have the money to rebuild the bridge area on Price like we did. If you had to wait 6 to 12 months or longer for infrastructure to be repaired, I mean, the results would be horrendous for our citizens. This is to prepare. We're not looking to borrow the money before we needed it. And it's money at low and no interest from the federal or state governments, which is reimbursable by FEMA. And what it does is it allows us to be prepared. If a storm hits and we get devastated, how could your electeds and your city government justify the fact that they didn't do anything to prepare for this? It's like, oh, gee, well, here's the storm. Just suck it up, everybody, and stay at home for the next 6 months to 12. It would be irresponsible on the part of our government. And I appreciate that you are a no government guy. I get it. I get it. But at the same time,
less government is my opinion.
Well, at the same time, that issue of less is a debatable subject. And when you have a city of 100,000 people, it's a responsibility of your electeds in the city government to see to it you're all safe, that we maintain a quality of life for you all, and that we prepare for the eventualities that we may face as a city. That's the responsibility we wear every day. So, if somebody's got a better way to do this, I'm all for it. But boy, I sure wouldn't want to be running around in the aftermath of a hurricane trying to figure out how we're going to go gather 50, 60, 80, 90 million dollars to clean ourselves up.
So how can you guarantee low interest rates? I don't understand that. You guys are you have no in your vision to pay this money back is a pipe dream. We're going to get the money back from the government, from other taxpayers that's going to give us this money to pay this loan back. You guys don't really have a way to pay this money back other than low interest loans that's not guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed in life, either in government.
Miss Kim.
So what we had from Ian, FEMA actually reimbursed us 100% of the debris removal. but that doesn't happen overnight.
That's
So
true.
that's where we have some cash flow needs in the beginning. So FEMA reimburses 100% for debris removal. The pieces that we didn't receive 100% for were like facility damages, things like that. We receive a high percentage, but not the 100%.
No, I'm voting no.
Thank you, sir. Next up.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for these three town halls to help us sort this out. I think the only request that I would have is if you are asking us to make an investment, that we get a sense, maybe two or three, um, you know, bullet items on our return on that investment would be helpful. So I'm in marketing sales. It's all about positioning, right? And sort of how you're going to sell this to the people. So, and you touched on this, Mayor Stokes, briefly, how we respond to the community in a disaster crisis situation. So it would be helpful as we walk through these steps that we also talk about what that return on our investment will be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I actually only have kind of comments more than questions, if that's okay. I admire all of you for putting yourselves up here because it's jobs that are thankless all of the time. But you also see yourselves as the people you are. You respect yourselves, you respect your citizens, and therefore you expect that that's how it would always be. It might not always be you that are in these seats. And what I see is a conflict of interest. The very people that declare a local emergency are the very people that approve the borrowing. So I see that as a big conflict. And I also feel that even though I agree with you that availability of borrowing immediately is paramount, but I still think there should be a cap to give the rest of the citizenship the feeling that there is controls in place. Now, I know that you don't know from day to day what that kind of cap might be, but nonetheless, a cap would help because that would give me the confidence that if a bus load of you all are gone tomorrow, the next people in line would have controls in place until they learn their jobs. And the other thing is someone else mentioned, why can't you do a special election? Well, we know that you didn't after Ian, so when this became obvious that it was a big deal. So I do think that there is points to be made on those factors. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Anything else on the first referendum item? Borrowing for declared emergencies. All right, let's move on to the second one, which is item 25-1928. It's discussion regarding referendum question relating to removal of residency requirements from the City of Northport Charter for the city attorney and city clerk positions with public question and answer session. City manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, our charter states that the other two charter officers, other than myself, need to live within the city of Northport. They are both non-public facing positions. You do not normally see your city clerk or your city attorney out in the public as you do with your city manager. So we believe that the request of the people is, can we not have that restriction in our charter so that we can allow for a larger candidate pool to serve the citizens here in the city of Northport? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, city manager. Questions on this referendum item? Anybody? You already asked a question. You can't answer that.
I'm Dave Garper. I think this is they should live here in the city. I mean, we're all citizens of the Northport. They should be also and pay the same taxes we pay. I mean, it's cut and dry. I mean, don't change the charter just for two positions in our city charter, which there's three of them in our city charter. Make them all part of the city.
we have, oh, yeah, you want to ask a question? But,
I would
yeah,
just like to understand where you came up with this. I understand you think you're going to get a bigger pool, but a bigger pool doesn't necessarily quality. I've done HR. Pools are difficult, but to live and work and have access by the citizens to these people that we pay their salaries to seems important to me because I think that they have a vested interest in the place in which they live and work. And if they don't live here and they only work here, then they're taking those dollars somewhere else, wherever that might be, and there's no investment in the community in which they're working and representing us in the attorney and the clerk's office. That's all representing us citizens. So how do we know you really have a vested interest in us, the citizens, if you're not even willing to invest your life in our community? I would just like to understand that.
who would like to take that?
I'll go first.
Mr. Petra?
Perhaps, like you said, we have to start from the beginning. Why do we even have this question on the ballot? Um, and I want to correct you on one thing. The representatives of the people is the commission. We are the public face of the city, not not the charter officers. It's us, because we were
Well,
elected by you.
represent us.
I'm sorry?
Their opinions represent us.
Yes. So as a fiscally responsible guy and efficiency guy, I ask myself, why do we have to go and do a recruitment outside of our city? As you or most of you know, our city attorney resigned last year. So we have a interim city attorney, and he's well trained. He's been with the city for quite some time. And among ourselves, we talked. It was a public meeting, and we said, why do we have to recruit somebody else when we have a guy who is among ourselves, but he lives just outside of the city of Northport, and for personal reasons he can't move in to the city. And I asked our recruiter, our dear and expensive recruiter, I asked him personally, have you ever hired a city attorney within the city limits? And his answer was no. And why pay him a big chunk of money? You can look it up how much. I don't even know how much, but it's expensive.
It is very expensive.
It is expensive. So to me, it would make such a common sense again. We can utilize in-house person who lives just who lives in the Sarasota County, but not in the city, but very knowledgeable with the city. Doesn't have to have a training. He's already been with the city, very well versed with the city problems. Um, why not? But the charter prevents. And like any charter, there has to be some improvements. The charter is not a perfect document. It's been drafted long time ago.
But you're talking about changing the charter for one individual.
Correct. Two individuals.
Well,
City clerk lives in the city.
one incident
Yes.
forever.
Yes. But those are not public
So
positions.
there's no guarantee that you're going to get that same quality, that same situation, that same scenario if one of them would decide to leave tomorrow.
And believe me, if I was hired by the city, I would, by my personal choice, I would move as close as possible to my job site. So in essence, we brought this to you, and far be it from me to go against the will of the people. That's why we're presenting this question to you, because it makes sense, fiscally responsible, to have someone to save money as a city commission. But it's up to you to vote yes or no. And that's like I said again, I'm not advocating, I'm presenting.
No, I understand. I just don't understand why you would want to change the charter for one scenario. You might save money this time, but you're not going to necessarily save it.
Oh, because we're gonna, if you vote no, if you vote no, we have to go and recruit somebody else. And believe me, the pool of candidates shrinks by a lot. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Langdon.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. It's not like every municipality in the United States needs 100 city clerks, right? They need one, or city attorneys. These people with quality people with these skill sets do not grow on trees. And when we make it very restrictive, we potentially eliminate the highest quality candidate from taking the job. And so, what we all want to ensure, it's not just about city attorney, it's also about the future. We want to make sure we hire the very best people here in the city to do our work. And if we are artificially restrictive, then we're kind of shooting ourselves in both feet. And I will say to you, I don't know how long ago it was, but we used to not have a residency requirement for those two positions. And I forget how many years ago. 2018, we voted to make it more restrictive. So don't get so hung up on why would we change things in the charter, not a lot, but on a fairly regular basis as the need warrants. And the other comment I want to make, this is my 5th year as a commissioner, and I can tell you I do not know which of our staff live in the city or don't. They all have such a high level of commitment to their work, to the city, to their profession. These people are professionals, and they have pride in performance, and they have pride in delivering high quality outcomes for the residents of the city. So you don't need to be concerned that their commitment is less because they live 2 miles outside the city in unincorporated Sarasota County.
Mr. Mayor, really quick, and to your point, ma'am, about the access, they're always accessible during regular business hours. It's rare that you, as the public, will need these two positions outside of regular business hours. And also, as Commissioner Langdon said, we have about 1,000 employees. I'm pretty sure over half of them do not live in the city of Northport, and it does not affect their quality of work.
I used to recruit for the technology industry. I know what you're facing.
Um,
Have you advertised your open positions?
You have to come up.
hold
Yes.
on.
Commissioner Duval.
I heard you, ma'am, say, their opinions represent us. Okay. The city clerk does not issue any opinions for the city. The city attorney does not issue any opinions for the city. Okay. The city commission and the city manager the city manager directs how to do things that the city commission directs them to do. The city clerk's job, okay, is to keep records and keep all the records for the city. The city clerk has no say whatsoever in what rules we make for the citizens uh, whatsoever. And the city attorney, okay, gives us legal advice as to if we want to pass a new ordinance. He might say, oh, you can try and do that, but it's against state law. He advises us. He does not make any kind of decisions for the city. And I want you to know that um, these people are dedicated to what they do. And city commission, like when we hire a new city attorney or when we hire a new city clerk, city commission has a say so in the contract. Now, it used to be that our city clerk used to get a monthly stipend for a vehicle. And back before I was a commissioner, I was at the meetings when they were discussing that. And it wasn't even for our current city clerk, it was for the one before that. And I stood up and said, city clerk works in City Hall keeping records and doesn't go anywhere. Why does the city clerk need a monthly car allowance. City Commission looked at that and said, hey, you're right. They took it away. Okay. And then it kind of tried to sneak back in when we rehired another city clerk. But again, I happened to be there and I stood up and I said, you know, job hasn't changed. And they took that car allowance out. And sometimes jokingly the city clerk calls me the guy that stole her car. But my point being that the city commission has a lot of say into how they perform their jobs, what things they have to do, and that's through the contract. Um, but to that point that their opinions represent the citizens, that's just not true.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. I think we have bigger fish to fry, but I do appreciate the robust conversation around this. And I just want to make a comment to my fellow citizen. You know, it's hard when when you're married and someone has to make a decision around where you live. And so I think to stay competitive, to keep this city competitive, we do need to allow some flexibility around that.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Question, please. Have you advertised open positions? If yes, where?
City manager, you want to take this?
You mean for any job or the two that we're talking about for this item?
For two-year openings, for city clerk and for the city attorney. How do you know there's no qualified candidates if you not advertise a job? Maybe people live here across the street.
It would not exclude those people who live across the street, but what we want to do is include those people who live up the street or down the street.
But have you advertised? I'm asking a question.
We advertise jobs for the city all around this region and the state all the time, sir.
But exactly specifically for those two positions. Have you advertised those positions?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Let's move on to the next referendum item. 25-1930, discussion regarding referendum question relating to borrowing authority for the Northport Police Department headquarters project with public question and answer. City manager, you want to introduce it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is asking the voters for approval to build a new police headquarters for $115 million through the financial vehicle of general obligation bonds. It is not asking if the public agrees with the price of the project. The commission has already vetted and decided on the price of the project. It is not asking the citizens for the need of the project. We've had two different consultants consult on the project and have outlined the needs, and our police leadership and city leadership have worked with them in order to get us to this point. We have heard multiple times tonight, you know, the fiscal conservatism and the responsibility of taxpayers' dollars. This is the cheapest way to build the police headquarters. The police headquarters will be built. If this fails, it will just be in a different financial method. The different method, if you looked on our website, we actually put a PFM report, who is our financial advisors. They did a comparison of how much it would cost with a geo bond purchase versus a different purchase, most likely a lease to buy purchase. And the difference is about $2 million. So you're really looking at something, again, where we need to decide, is the money that we're going to pay more worth us saying no, or do we buy this the most efficient way and you allow your government to be efficient, which is what people say that they want in this particular project? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Come on, nobody has a question on
I have
this.
a question
Oh, well, yes,
from
ma'am.
a resident. We received one question online for this item from, I'm Madison Ingalls with Communications with the City. I don't know how I'm supposed to introduce myself. So this question from Art Bilski is, I have a very simple question. Did I understand Mr. Fletcher correctly in the past forum that if the referendum to finance the new police station does not get approved, that he and the city will still go forward with the construction of the police station? Is not the lack of the approval of the referendum a mandate from the citizens to not spend $115 million? Thank you.
I'm happy to answer that question. The answer to Mr. Bilski's question is absolutely. We will build this police headquarters because it is essential that we have it to maintain our safety of the citizens in this city. When the existing police headquarters was occupied in 2006, it was already outgrown. In 2017 or 18, and again in 23, independent third party consultants who do this for a living nationwide. These are companies that study need and report back to municipalities. They don't have a vested interest. They're not going to build it for us. They've come back in both cases and determined that the need exists. And they determined the scope of that need. And those decisions for two commissions now, prior to November's election, all five commissioners, including Commissioner McDowell and Commissioner White, and the three of us voted unanimously to support this, the need and the scope. Since then, we've had two new commissioners join us who also support this. And all that this referendum item is, as city manager said, is this the most fiscally responsible way to do it? It is, as representatives, our responsibility to determine what needs to be done and the need. And this is a need. We have all grown very comfortable with our public safety. People actually say infrastructure in our city is more important than public safety. Really? The reason they do is because we're so bloody safe. And this city's growing so fast at 104 square miles of city. I would not want to think of what would happen if crime got out of hand in this city. And so, if independent studies show that we need this and commissions have already decided it, what we're asking the citizens is what our charter requires us to do is this the best way to pay for it? We could have someone else build it. It's going to cost us a whole heck of a lot more money, and we won't get it built the exact way we'd like it. And the other thing is, if we build this, we free up the building that they're in now. We have space needs everywhere. We will be able to repurpose that building and save our taxpayers millions in savings by not having to expand other departments. You just can't keep up with a city that's doubled in size and is going to double again without spending money. And despite some people's perspective that, well, you just don't need to spend it, government's too big. Well, I hear you, but when public service fails, when safety fails, when, you know, I mean, people are going to hold their leadership responsible. So it's our responsibility to do what we believe is in the best interest of the most people. And that's why this building is important. And again, the focus should be on, is this the best way to pay for it? Because if anybody can find a cheaper way to do it, let us know.
Yeah, I'll also comment on this because early on in the process of discussing our police headquarters, I was against spending $122 million to build it. And let me tell you why. Early on in the process, we were approaching it as a pay as you go method, which is the way this city has had to um, approach its capital investments. We would have to save up the money till we had it all and then spend it. And when we were kind of identifying what pools of money did we have that we might be able to transfer into the bucket to build a police headquarters, we had to give up so many other critical projects that we determined we just couldn't do it. And as I really dug into it and understood the wisdom of building the shelf space, I don't know how deeply you've gone into the designs of this thing, but part of it is to build out shelf space that will allow our police personnel to grow into that space to 2065 which is when this city will be built out. So we'll never have to face building another police headquarters again. So let's also talk a little bit about what are the implications of a pay-as-you-go methodology. Let's look at the widening of Price Boulevard. We all have taken a lot of heat for talking about that project for 15 years, and it's finally happened. And could we save the money? We chased the costs. Costs go up every year. We kept chasing, putting that money aside until we realized we couldn't do it. We put it out to a referendum, and wisely, the residents of this city did allow us to go out and borrow for the widening of Price. What we have learned, and what I have learned, is every year we delay in building a new building or incurring some very large capital project cost, the cost of that project goes up 8 to 10%. So if it takes us 5 years or 10 years to amass that money, that project is going to cost us a heck of a lot more. It is the most expensive way to fund a capital project, without doubt. The other issue, and this was sort of a head exploding moment to me when I realized this, when we pay as you go, what that means is all of us and the people who lived here in the past, who perhaps don't even live here anymore, will pay for that facility. And people who move here next week get to enjoy it and don't pay a penny. Is that fair to us? It's not. When we borrow money and pay it back over time, we're a growing city. And people who move here a month from now, or a year from now, or 5 years from now will pay into that fund, not just us and people who lived here in the past. So there are a lot of reasons why borrowing makes sense. And I'll tell you, and maybe Miss Kim can back me up on this, but the most expensive way for us to approach capital projects like this is pay as you go. The most expensive way to do it, and unfair to people who live here now when people who move here next year get to enjoy that and don't contribute to it.
Yes, sir. You've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My name is Scott Smith, and I am the Vice President for the Florida chapter of Southwest of the Florida PBA, which represents all your sworn police officers in the city of Northport. And first off, on behalf of the PBA and all the men and women of the Northport Police Department, we want to thank you for your support in this endeavor. What I don't know if most people understand is the issues at hand with the current police department in this space is when you're putting people in closets for offices, you have a serious problem. Our administration in Northport has outgrown this facility way beyond anybody's means, and the PBA stands behind the decision to build this building for continuity of operations. There's been a lot of talk about maybe placing substations throughout the city. In law enforcement, if anybody's here in law enforcement knows that that is a very difficult way to manage anything. You cannot keep continuity of operations when you have people spread out throughout your city in a city of this size. We don't work in the city of Northport in a separated districting situation. Everything comes from headquarters. And we as the PBA want to at least express our concern that if this does not occur, that we do not receive this building, that how we would go forward with the growth within the city of Northport. And we want to make sure that the general public does understand that this is an absolute necessity for a city that is growing way beyond its the means that we had ever thought it would be at this time. And we do appreciate everything you guys have done at this point to support our members and the citizens of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. That's all right. My name is Aaron Jacobson. I'm architect with Schenkel Schultz, one of the firms that are working on the new police headquarters. This is just a comment, just to kind of put into perspective um, the difference of kind of where we are now versus where the police department was when they built their current headquarters. Their existing headquarters, 32,000 square feet. City Hall is about 67,000 square feet. So you're looking at about 100,000 square feet for that facility there. Back when it was constructed was $14 million for those two facilities. Looking at what we're at now, yes, we're building more facility there, but at 115 million, and it's not that drastic of a difference in size. So just to put it in perspective, if you don't have the foresight to build what you need now, and you try to kick the can down the road, it's going to wind up costing a substantial amount more than what you are now. So just to talk to what the commission's been saying, this is the cheapest time to build what you need for your facility to support your city and keep it safe. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. Um, I support having the new station. So I'm just asking a couple questions because it, so is it going to be funded on property tax? Because um, is there, I know, if you can think of another way, let's do it. So I moved back to my home state. I'm Priscilla Broward, so my family goes way back to the King of Spain. And my great uncle was the governor here in the state of Florida. So I'm just trying to do a deep dive here into Northport now. But I came from Idaho, and in Idaho, just an example, Idaho Falls approved a $30 million certificates of participation to fund the construction of its first dedicated police station. Sometimes cities can apply for federal grants from programs such as the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, which provides grant funding to support community policing. I'm just wondering, because I know there's been a lot of talk with the federal administration to help fund our police all over the country, and I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity here to um, maybe like, okay, so you have it budgeted with property tax, but like, can we shift that like another way? Is there a way to try to be a little bit more creative? That's my only question.
Well, to answer your question, yes, initially, this is funded through an ad valorem tax, which will be separate on your tax bill. In answer to your question, is there a federal or state funding available? Yes. When we went over the last 2 years, actually, to our state reps, we were told you have to have your funding in place, put your deal together, build your building, apply for grant monies. As we,
Chicken and egg?
yeah, yeah, you can't get the grants before you have the project paid for or, the money's available to pay for it. So when you think about what Commissioner Langdon said, which is if we put these bonds in place,
Mm-hmm.
as the city grows every year and we have a broader tax base, the amount that a property owner will pay on this will go down. It won't go up. And any grant funding or additional funds we may have can filter in to help reduce that number or shorten the term on the loans. So there is no other
I
way to
know
pay
it's a
for this.
challenge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you mentioned certificates of participation, which I'm delighted because I have to tell you that's a kind of a new thing to our city, but it's something we're very aware of. Certificates of participation, for people who don't know, is a method by which a municipality creates an entity that it controls. It then sells participation, kind of like bonds. It sells investments out into the investment community. That's where the money's raised. Then the building is built or the project's completed, and the city leases from that entity. The only problem is it is incrementally more expensive, not hugely more, not as bad as if you had a third party build it and you leased it from them with an option to buy, but it is a bit more expensive. And, you know, if you can do it the most economical way, I mean, that's the route we'd like to go. Certificates of participation may well be an option if this referendum doesn't pass, because the state does not consider that dead.
Yeah.
And that could be something very interesting in the spirit of community involvement and citizen involvement, taxpayer involvement. We felt the right thing to do is to ask our citizens to help fund this thing and to do it in the most economical way. So that's why we're looking at the bonds.
Right. Although, right, there's like property tax is a hot issue right now too, right? And coming from our governor, because that's going to be the next thing down the road. I mean, that's so my concern is that, there's changes that happen and legally, like um, how do we have a backup plan to be able to fund what we need for the police? So
You mentioned,
I know
well,
I know it's
again, the state's looking at, what they may do with property tax. And while I think maybe the opportunity to increase the homestead exemption exists,
yeah,
I think
yeah,
something like
that's
that
there
could
too.
possibly fly.
Short
The
term.
reality is, if property taxes were done away with, what would you replace them with? The bulk of property taxes pay for public safety and quality of
Right.
life. So what would happen? Should we double the sales tax or triple the sales tax? Well, what would that do to tourism? What would happen in a recession? How would cities and
Right.
municipalities budget and be able to depend on that revenue source? So, whether or not that's going to happen, I mean, I think the state and perhaps other states have talked about doing away with that for years. We don't have an income tax, which is a great thing, but we do have a good property tax. And, thank goodness the city of Northport enjoys one of the lowest millage rates around. As our city grows and as the city becomes a more viable place and exciting place to live, we can't help that our property values do appreciate, and the county has seen their way to assess those increases. But they do help build equity in our properties, even though we write a larger tax check every year. We've held the millage rate in this city flat for 5 years,
Yeah.
and we intend
Good
to
job.
do that again this year. And believe me, anybody, I'm all in on Doge this and Doge that, but I'll tell you, this city commission and prior city commissions, at least recent prior commissions, squeeze your tax dollar every chance we get. And anybody who doesn't think so, I'll defy them to point it out, because I got to tell you, we are you. We live in this city. We pay taxes just like you. Why would we want to just reach into everybody's pockets and grow our government any more than it needs to be grown? We want to make sure we maintain the character of this city that people have grown accustomed to and who want to move here for. We want to keep you as safe as you've been, because believe me, there are a lot of places that aren't as safe as Northport. And we can't control the growth. People keep coming. We can manage the growth, but we can't control it and we can't stop it. So we have to be as smart and strategic as we can. And that involves investing in our future.
1,000 people a day, 30,000 a month coming to the state. Yeah. Well, it's something to noodle over and try to figure out. Thank you.
Good word.
Um, when we had our last town hall, folks from the Sarasota County School Board showed up, and they told us what a young community we are. Our meaning, average age, mean age, median age, something like that, is around 48 years old. And they gave us statistics on the number of schools that they're going to have to be building in our area in the future. And they talked about numbers in the $100 million range for each of the schools. Do we not want to provide safety for the children in those schools? I understand $115 million is a lot of money, but you have to consider what the cost is if we don't do this. And building costs, they say construction costs are going up about 8% a year. We delay this, it's going to be a lot more. Also, I've been through our police station. We have officers out in patrol cars for 12 hours a day. That's where they're out. That's where you see them on the street. But behind them, there's a lot of other things: technology, evidence gathering, records keeping. I saw a place in our police department where evidence is processed, forensics. I had a bedroom closet as a boy that was as big as that room, and that's just a crime. Uh, you have to support the people that are taking care of you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name's Jesse. Um, I don't know if I missed something in one of the other meetings or it's probably been talked about a lot, but I know myself and a lot of my neighbors are trying to figure out. We thought this was voted down already for the police station in the last vote.
Was never on the November referendum
There
at
wasn't
all.
a
The
vote
only
for the
question
police
on the
station to be
November
built.
referendum was to allow the city commission to borrow money for emergencies, imminent infrastructure failure, and health and public safety related projects. No mention whatsoever of the police headquarters. And the reason is that is really a general obligation debt, which the citizens have to vote on. And nothing would change that.
Okay.
And,
Go ahead.
and just to expand on that a little bit, just because public health and safety was in that question, you still could not have built a police headquarters with the vote being yes last year. It is a large scale infrastructure project. It is a state law that if you use general obligation bonds, it must be voted on by the people. We said that explicitly before the vote last November.
And the other question I have, I guess, is you guys have been bragging how great you are at holding the financials down with the city. However, and you don't need Doge and we don't need this, but this entire meeting is about needing to borrow money. Um, how is that saying how financially responsible we are if we have to borrow? Everything on this list is to borrow money. We had to borrow this, borrow that.
Well, again, as Commissioner Langdon mentioned, when you pay as you go, you have to tax the current citizens of the city and accumulate all the money you need to do whatever it is that's necessary, whether it's to build a wastewater treatment plant, whether it's to build a solid waste plant, whether it's to build a police headquarters. If you spread that cost out over 30 years, you allow the growth of your city to help pay for it and new people who are going to benefit from those projects to help carry the burden. Um, any financial analyst would look at it and tell you and have they're astounded that the city has gone for 65 years without the ability to borrow and that it's had to pay cash on the barrelhead for things. Price Boulevard is a glowing example of how not to do things. 15 years, a project that should have cost $5 million, had we been able to finance it back then, turned into an $80 million project and ended up having to be financed anyway. So if you don't learn from your mistakes, I mean, that truly is the definition of insanity. Any financial person will tell you, any financial consultant will tell you that it is important to be able to make the most fiscally responsible decisions on how you address your growth. The city's not static, it's growing, it has needs. And so we can be very fiscally responsible, manage our budget. We've won awards for budgeting and financial management, but that doesn't mean that we don't have financial needs as we grow. How do you keep up with doubling and tripling your population? Um,
Stop
you got to
building
do it some
apartment
way.
complexes.
What's that?
Stop building apartment complexes.
I don't know. People, it's for, you know, amazingly enough, for every dollar a single family homeowner pays in taxes, it costs us more than a dollar. Multifamily and higher density residential provide living opportunities for people who maybe don't want a single family house or can't afford a single family house. The diversity of housing options allows Northport to be an attractive place for a whole host of types of people to live here, not to mention that
And
higher.
debt.
Well, most of those projects are built privately. City doesn't build apartment complexes. They're built by
No, but
private
the
investment.
Yes,
residents that
Mayor.
are moving in, all these people that are moving here daily, are creating this debt by building the apartment complexes, all these massive complexes. You're moving more and more people in that we can't afford. So now we're taking out loans to be able to afford them people that apparently are bringing us a whole bunch of money.
City manager.
Does that make any sense? I may be wrong. I'm not a
Yeah,
city
I, I,
constable.
I'm not going to question your theory there. I just want, you said something about Doge earlier, and like we don't need Doge. And I'm trying to figure out where did that come from. They sent us a letter. We answered their question in a very speedy manner and told them that we were ready to answer any more questions that they may have. This city, when the state looks at this city, the first thing they're going to look at is, well, how are they doing in their taxes and property taxes and everything else? We're one of the fastest growing cities in the country. We are providing the state money. Then they're going to say, well, how much debt do you have? We have very low debt because we can't borrow. We are an example of what a city, a good city in this state should look like, and we're being questioned as if we're trying to hide something under the cushions of the couch. We are ready for Doge and anyone to come in and look at anything that we've done. So this narrative that we are disinviting them or don't want them in here is not true.
Yeah, the one thing that I just wanted to add to about the borrowing is when we went through Ian, we expelled about over $50 million worth of our ready cash to clean up the city. If we would have gotten hit by Milton, we couldn't have done the same thing. We could have had piles of trash sitting out there for months and months and months. And what does that breed? That brings rats, it brings sickness, this, that, and the other. But let's just say we're back in Ian and we got $50 million and we're getting ready to do this cleanup, but yet we're allowed to borrow $15 million, and it could be forgivable to where we just saved the taxpayers $15 million on that cleanup because it was forgiven because we borrowed it, and that's through FEMA, the different government laws and stuff like that. And it didn't come out of our coffers to begin with. So therefore, if Milton came in, we would have had a little bit of a buffer to at least start a cleanup process and go through. To be able to borrow is an asset. Yes, it's debt, but if it's forgivable, to me, it's not really that much debt if it gets paid off instead of us paying it off. And it gets paid off in the future. Like FEMA comes in, we pay that debt. So it's not even affecting the citizens, but it is when that cleanup happens because now you can travel down that road. Now you can cross that bridge that we just fixed. But if we got to pay for it one step at a time, bridge is closed, come back next year because that's what it takes to revamp a city after a major storm, especially this one. And we've got floodplains throughout this whole city that was very devastating when Ian came through that we didn't even
And the flooding's only
recognize.
getting worse.
Well, there are works on that up north and stuff like that. We're working on that, but no promises for in the near future on that. But yes, it is bad. I will give you that.
I
That's all.
I honestly I understand the hurricane relief situation. That gets expensive, especially if we have two, three hurricanes back to back. But there's way more. I understand you're pushing really hard on this hurricane one or on the disaster relief, but there's three other things on the referendum here for more taking out more debt that doesn't have anything to do with the hurricanes. We need a police station, okay? So we're taking out debt there. Waste management. I have well water. I don't even run a line anywhere near my house. And I'm not saying that I should be excluded from that by any means. I'm just saying that when are they going to start extending city sewer and water? Um, stuff like that. I mean, we're taking out debt for all this stuff, but and you're saying that, well, we nothing we can do about it. And when I just say, well, you're building apartment complexes, well, that's just bringing in more. You're creating debt with that. We're not making money. We're taking out more loans now than we were obviously ever before.
As I said before, the difficulty is the city doesn't own the land in this city. It's owned privately, which means that developers can come in and build houses, they can build apartments, they can build commercial properties as long as the zoning allows them, and it does. Every city's allow it in the right places. So consequently, they're going to build it. And the city has to meet the need for services, for safety, for infrastructure. And where do those dollars come from? Ultimately, all the dollars come out of our pockets. There is no disputing that. But in order to provide the level of safety and quality of life that we have here in this city, the money has to come from somewhere. So if you accept that we have to have the money to meet these needs, then it's how do you do it the best way possible? And certainly the best way possible is to spread the cost over the years so that present and future citizens and businesses, property owners and businesses can help pay for it. It's not unlike when you buy a house. I mean, think of how difficult it would be if you had to rent your entire life because you couldn't afford to buy a house, because you couldn't do it unless you wrote a check for 100, 200, 300, $400,000 in cash. But yet you're able to go to the bank and within your financial means to pay it back, you borrow the money and you're able to own your own home and your kids can play in your backyard and you can have a quality of life that's certainly more, you know, agreeable to you than if you were living in a couple of bedroom apartment. And it's not dissimilar. Um, just because we borrowing is a tool. It's a financial tool to help you meet your needs and do it in a financially responsible way. Paying cash on the barrelhead for everything is very difficult to do, especially when you have 100,000 people you're trying to provide basic services for. Um, to save up that money it is just virtually impossible, as we saw with Price Boulevard. How could you justify paying $80 million to widen a street a couple of miles? $80 million when it should have cost 5 or 6 if we had done it 15 years ago. And that's not to pick on past commissions. It was that it took a lot of guts to stand up to the citizens and saying, we need to do this, folks. You need to spend the time to think about it, to appreciate how valuable this is, how we're making an investment in our city's future, and how it's going to cost a whole lot more if we wait 15 years to do it. You know, we ought to get it done commission, and you can like it or not, but in the long run, what we do is going to be in the financial interests of the city. You have 5 commissioners here who are as fiscally responsible as it gets. And I defy anybody to find a more fiscally responsible way to do these things. I'm all ears if you can find a cheaper way to do it. But if you think by not doing it, we're doing the city a service, you're wrong. Okay? So.
Thank you.
Um, at the last town hall meeting, you had actually thrown out a number associated with this particular project. I recall it was like $141 per house that was assessed at 250,000. Um, I don't know where everybody in this room is from, but probably there's not a house in Welland Park that's assessed at $250,000. So I would like for somebody to throw some numbers out that are ideas for that are realistic for people's home values, not just 250. Let's talk about 350 or 500. And
You know what you can actually do if you go to the city's website? Yeah, you can.
please,
There's actually a little calculator where you can put in the assessed value of your property. It will tell you exactly what it will come to. For $500,000 assessed value, okay, which is a little more in keeping with this area of the city, you're looking at about $250 a year. It's a little over $20 a month.
and if this referendum passes, is that going to take effect for the 2026 calendar year? When is it set to take effect?
Good questions. Maybe the year after, just by the time all
Yeah.
this gets
It would not be ready and done for next
Yeah.
year. It would take another
Right,
year
right
minimum.
until after.
All right, so we have this particular project that we're voting on. We have kind of a bond project for the emergency disaster situations. We're about to get to the next issues, which are stormwater, the transfer station, which I think it was that gentleman over there told us it was like $2 per month per household. Eventually, that might become a profitable enterprise. That is kind of the only person that gave me a number that I could relate to because the $250,000 home doesn't apply to my home. And then the water, the city water project was clueless, like not a number, couldn't say if it was a $25 per utility customer or $100 per utility customer. So I'm hoping today's meeting will throw out some more numbers so people know what they're voting on.
The next two will help you, and I suggest, especially on the solid waste transfer station, look at the city website because there is, if you go right to that site up top, there's a yellow bar. Click on that. It says, what's in the referendums, blah blah blah, and you can go right down through.
Yeah, well, I remember he said $2 a month.
That's right.
But that was the only number that
Yep.
really came
When
out of
we
the
get
last
to the
meeting. So I'm
next
hoping for
two,
today's people speak up. And, I hear you referring us to the website,
Yep.
but let's hear it because not
You will.
everybody can.
when we
can
get to the next
access
two
that.
items,
Thank
you
you.
bet. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'd like to just expand on my original question, which is what has changed since the election in November? How long has the police station been in the planning stage?
I believe the original design was done in 2018. The last design update was done in 2023, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it fair to say it could have been put on the ballot in November?
No,
No.
because we needed to do more information. The public, when we had hearings like this, told us to do more research and to come back with more information, which is what we did, which is why it was not on November.
I see. So I was going to expand my question, which I don't think I've heard an answer to yet about the various referenda, is what has changed since November? Perhaps this has because you didn't have enough information since 2018. But what has changed? Not what all the arguments for doing the project are, because I'm not necessarily against doing this. I was on a board similar to yours, and we built a police station. It was wonderful. We also spent a lot of time on our CapEx budget, trying to figure that out, which you've talked about as well. All these things are all nice discussion, and the mayor and the former mayor very articulate in what they're saying in terms of why this is happening, why it would be more expensive otherwise. But it sort of all comes back to the people, and they voted in some of these referenda anyway, I would say, that they didn't want this at that time. And so I don't understand why it's puzzling to me why $131,000, I think that's what you said, is being spent for this special election.
Do you mean for the, you mean people said they didn't want the police headquarters?
No, I'm sorry, I don't know why you got that impression.
I know exactly what, if you would be so kind,
Yeah.
I can address your question. First
Go
of all, in November, there was only one referendum question.
Yeah.
And the question was, will you, the citizens, allow the city commission to borrow money for emergencies, declared emergencies, imminent infrastructure failure, and safety and public and safety related projects? Very broad mandate. Would have changed the charter to allow this city commission or future city commissions to basically borrow money for whatever commission voted to spend money on. And it was voted down by 300 votes out of over 50,000 voters. And consequently, this set of referendums is in a direct response to what the voters said in November, which is if you want to borrow money for projects, come and ask, and we'll evaluate them. We'll make as good a decision as we can and let you know whether you can or you can't. Other than the emergency borrowing, which is basically a tool in the event of a disaster, these three projects are because you all told us you want us to ask. That's why we're asking. Totally different. The solid waste treatment project wasn't on the November ballot. Either was the wastewater treatment plant. Either was the police headquarters. You said, come to us with your projects. Let us vote as to whether or not how you want to pay for them makes sense. And we're doing exactly what you all asked us to do. I mean,
I'll take a shot at it too, because I think some things have changed in our world. And it's my feeling that previous commissions, and I'm not saying whether this decision was right or wrong, but previous commissions were willing to live within that pay as you go model with all of the unintended consequences of that model that we've discussed tonight. And then enter COVID, and two things happened in spades for this city. We started growing by 5% a year, I think in the past, and it was like totally illogical. Why would the growth in this city explode in the middle of a pandemic? But that's exactly what happened. And Northport, as I'm sure you guys are aware, because you seem like a very in touch group, our city has been identified over and over again as one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. Now, we've grown in the past, but much more modestly. So all of a sudden, we're growing by 5% a year. And what else happened simultaneously? COVID and supply chain disruptions. And suddenly, construction projects, particularly construction in this part of the world, exploded beyond what anyone could have anticipated. So, what did that force all of us to do? We really had to rethink how we were doing things because pay as you go didn't work very well in the past. Now, with those two things happening, pay as you go totally broken. We cannot effectively manage this city any longer with that funding model. So I'm hoping
Right.
that answers the question. For me, those were the two things. It was mind exploding what
But
we learned during the past few years. And it took us a couple years to maybe catch up with all of that and to realize we had to really expand our thinking on different options for funding these kinds of projects. We could not continue in the old way of doing things.
but again, that's over the past couple of years. So again, my real question is, since November, what has really changed? Why is it that you need to spend $131,000 on an election? Where a lot of people will not go out to vote like they did in the general election. And you are definitely talking to a smaller crowd now trying to get this passed.
Yeah, the one thing I would like to add to that is like when we were discussing the referendums last year, we were also looking at the police department as a possibility on some of the funding and stuff if that were to pass. It wasn't written in stone because we didn't have all the designs. We haven't gone over everything at that point. But right now, the reason it's on here is we need to figure out which financial road we are going to take to build that police station. Is it going to be with borrowed money, low interest rate right now? Or do we have to go through the certificate of participations or lease options or this, that, and the other? So it's being brought back to the citizens to say, which way would you rather have us build this police station because it's being built? Would you like to go with this referendum because that's the most feasible way to do it? Or are we going to go and possibly wait another year to get all the certificate of participation, lease options, all that stuff, and more conversations to where it's $8 more million? That's why the rush is on to when they asked us to subsection all of these items, this is what we need. This is exactly what we need right now. It's better to borrow for it than to have to come up with the money right now and expend all of our money that we have in our reserves. These are needs. So it's up to the public and the citizens to go out there and vote with their hearts whether they want to do it this way or that way.
But again, didn't you choose that road in November?
I think
Which you asked the voters which road?
No, no, that didn't. That was not included at that because we didn't have all the information just on the PD. It was for safety and welfare and stuff like that. Could it have been used? Yes, it could have, but
I, I think I got
not an entire.
I think I got the answer to your question, but we have to go back before last November. Go back to last March. So in March of 24, we were talking about doing the police headquarters and we were talking to the public. And the public said, you need to go back and come up with a different financial plan. And so we said, well, let's use surtax to pay for it. And that is, the penny tax that we get. And it was $316 million over a 15-year period. And they would say, well, the police headquarters should have been out of the surtax. It's too much. It would have eaten up too much of the surtax. It was never meant to be in that particular pool of funding. So we said, okay, we'll rearrange some items and delay some and defer some projects, and we'll use $50 million in surtax to pay for it, so that we don't have to borrow that money using property tax. We got resistance and pushback from that. It was already mentioned from the state level. We have representatives who support us in this project and are looking to get upwards around $20 million for this particular project, but we have to have it paid for first, and then it comes back to us if we are successful in getting it. So we were using that time in order to figure out how we could reduce the cost of the project. But at the end of the day, we didn't use the surtax because of the pushback. We had to wait on the grant. So now we're back here asking the question of the 115. We did not know all of that information with the still enough time to go out and educate and talk to the public to tell them of what the new plan was. So we made the main thing, which was the borrowing authority. So we said, okay, let's just focus on that. That should be pretty straightforward. You want to borrow on a hurricane and you want to fix something if it's broken. The citizen said, no, don't do that. We want you to come back and ask us in two separate questions. So here we are with the two separate questions, and here we are with the police headquarters. And then the other two items are not taxes. They are items and projects that are built that are paid through revenue bonds. So this one is the true tax item that we're asking you for today, which is the headquarters. I hope that made sense to give you some history of how we got here.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's move on to next item. 25-1922, discussion regarding referendum question relating to borrowing authority for the solid waste transfer station project. Public question and answer session. City manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we do have some staff here from our public works department to ask and answer some more technical questions. But on our website, I want to read you what we have so you can have an understanding that the city is planning to build a new solid waste transfer station on Silverleaf Road. It's in the eastern portion of the city on a site that will not impact neighbors. Transfer stations are facilities where collected trash is temporarily unloaded, sorted, and prepared for further handling before final disposal at a landfill or other waste processing facility. The most efficient and fair method of financing costs for this project is through the issuance of bonds secured by and payable from the revenues, charges, fees, and assessment derived from solid waste revenues. It is not a new tax. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like I said, staff is here to answer some more detailed questions.
Thank you, City Manager. Questions on this item? Thank you, ma'am.
You hear that, Frankie?
Yeah, I would urge again,
I would like to make a comment on this.
by all means.
When I bought my house here in 2008, every school bus that carries all our children to school and picks them up and brings them home every night, well, excuse me, every morning, they came from Sarasota. And every night they went back to Sarasota. That doesn't happen anymore. All the school buses stay off Toledo Blade in Northport every night. Why did we make that change? Actually, the city didn't make that change. The county school district made that change. And it's because it saves money. It makes sense. Why would you have those buses go back and forth like that? Well, this transfer station is an example of that exactly. Instead of having every one of our solid waste, our, to use common vernacular, our garbage trucks, every day, every time they get full, to drive up to Sarasota to the landfill and then back, that's a misuse of our employees' time. It's a misuse of every one of our vehicles when they should be staying here. When we can have, instead of 5 garbage trucks drive up there and back, 1 tractor trailer can bring a compacted load up. Plus, with the location of this on the eastern side of the city, that puts us close to another county, Charlotte County. Port Charlotte area is also growing. In the future, there's a possibility that they could use our transfer station. Do you think we'll give it to them for free? No. This project will pay for itself. Period.
Yeah, just to pile on to Commissioner Duval, the ROI, the return on investment on this project's incredible. Less than 10 years. I mean, we're at the point with growth where we're going to start to have to spend a couple of $1 million a year more on people and equipment to haul this stuff up to Sarasota. This is a no-brainer. This one is so smart. This is a perfect example of the right thing to do, and it will also, again, spread the cost, which is tremendous for all those people and businesses in the future are going to benefit from it. The savings alone after it's completed and in operation is, I believe, about $1.5 million a year and growing up into a couple of million or more as the years go on. I think it was over a 5-year period from 25 to 30. um, Projected savings is something like $13 million for our citizens tax, our taxpaying citizens. Great project.
We are recording this
Oh,
for
that's
people
fine.
who couldn't
I'm
be
just
here tonight.
clarifying something because you mentioned that there is no new tax on doing this. It's going to be paid for by fees. But the only people that are going to be using this are the people that are getting garbage collection services in the city. In essence, it's a tax, correct? I mean, it is what it is. And also, you haven't raised ad valorem taxes, but against a pretty vocal opposition last year, there was a 300 and some odd dollar assessment placed for, I believe, for solid waste, the 200 some odd dollar assessment for the fire department, and miscellaneous amount for roads or drainage or whatever. So for someone with an assessed home value of 250, $300,000, they almost doubled their tax rate. It was like over 700 some odd dollars. And I believe you had a 10% annual increase maybe on it. And that's a significant increase in taxes, whatever you want to call it. It's still a tax increase. And my question, are those ever going to go away? Is that just going to stay there perpetually? And the same with for an example, say we're going to pay back the bond for the solid waste, which is a no-brainer. I don't have a problem with that. It's great. But say for an example, you borrow $1 million, amortize it over 30 years, you're paying $3,000, whatever a month or whatever it is, 10 people paying for it. You're doubling the population, you're doubling it again, you're doubling it again. Well, pretty soon you got, instead of 10 people paying, you got 20 people paying it, 30 people paying it. You still have a 30-year loan. Where's the excess payments going? Are they going to pay the principal off and retire the loan sooner? You're going to lower the tax rate some other way because you're going to be making more money that should offset that you borrowed for, right? So how
Both
is that coming back to the residents?
both very viable options. And you're right. by spreading it out and we over time grow the tax base, both residentially and commercially, yeah, the opportunity to either keep taxes and user fees flat or reduce them can exist. You know, you made a good point, and I've said it. City government, county government, state government, federal government, they don't have any money. Who has the money? We have the money. The money comes out of our pockets. Whether you want to call it a property tax, whether you want to call it usage, you're 100% right. But I'll tell you what I've found in my limited career here in government is that people seem to respond better to paying taxes for services they get. And, we call them assessments, we call them all host of different things. It's still a tax. I agree with you. We can play the word games all you want and wordsmith it. But when you see the direct benefit of the services you get, it's a little more palatable. Property tax is one of those things that you pay based on the value of your property, goes into a general fund that pays a whole host of things. So governments tend to want to lean more towards the user type related taxes, and that is what this city's looked to. For years, I think our district and enterprise funds lagged a little behind where they should have been. And with the strong growth, people like to say growth pays for growth, but it kind of lags. And you have to make that investment. And yeah, it costs us a little more. And yes, we have been paying more. But in time, as we grow out and as our tax base expands, the opportunity to shift some of that burden exists. Something nobody mentioned here, and it's not directly related to our 5 referendum items, is this city was built as a bedroom community. Less than 10% of our tax revenues come from non-residential means. The money's coming all out of our pockets, us property owners. As we build this city out and we grow our commercial and industrial base, the ability to shift that tax burden exists.
Is there a plan to build something other than homes? Because all we see are house building everywhere here.
Out east, we have more land
Good.
out east than all of Welland Park. And that is after much painful rezoning over the last 2 years. Hopefully, we'll assure that those areas get developed in a commercial
Good.
and light industrial way. There is a plan. It's just takes time.
Well,
And,
that's fine. I just
appreciate your
say it.
input. You asked a
Also,
great,
thank you guys
great
for
question.
letting me stand up and beat you guys up over here.
It is our pleasure.
Moving on to our last item.
25-1934, discussion regarding referendum question relating to borrowing authority for capital improvements for the Pan American Wastewater Treatment Facility with public question and answer session. City Manager, you want to introduce that one?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. And we also have our utilities department here to answer some questions regarding this one as well. But the department needs to make improvements to the effluent pumping station. That's a system that transports reclaimed water. A new 30-inch pipeline needs to be built between the Pan American Boulevard facility and a deep injection well where the treated water is discharged to. A yes vote would allow the city to finance this project through the issuance of bonds that would be paid back from water and sewer utility revenues. It is also not a new tax. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Who's got questions on this one? What? Everybody's getting tired? If you want to come up, there you go.
I do have a question on this. So from what I read, and I'm not educated in all this, so my question may be dumb, but from what I read is you were notified a couple of years ago that this well and the injection well was insufficient for the growth of our community. So knowing that, and it's been I think a couple of years, why are we continuing to issue building permits, which creates more treated water to make the situation worse until now we're in a position where we're probably going to be in trouble with the federal government because we really have to get this done now. And again, it's I'm uneducated. I had to ask what the treated water was. Was it sewer water? Was it toilet water? What exactly did that entail? But I felt like okay, we probably should not be growing so fast if we don't have the capacity to take care of that growth.
Not a dumb question at all. Pretty smart question.
I'm Susan Bracefield, the Assistant Utility Director. So the existing pump station in Forest Main, which we are planning to upgrade, pump treated wastewater, which is used for reclaimed water, to a deep well, injection well. Under normal operation, when we have dry weather, the reclaimed water is, instead of being pumped to that injection well, it is used for irrigation for several of the communities in the city of Northport. But when it is wet weather, we can't pump irrigation water onto the grass because we don't want to flood yards. So we need to pump that water to the deep injection well.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but that doesn't answer the question why we're continuing
I'm
to
sorry,
allow growth.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Sorry, I
I'm sorry.
apologize if it's taking me too long. But so during normal operation, our pumps have capacity to pump the water to the deep injection well if it can't be used for irrigation. But just recently in August, we had very bad wet weather rain events. And the amount of water coming into our sanitary sewer system was able to be treated by our wastewater treatment plant because we do have excess capacity there, but we couldn't pump it out fast enough. So that water we discharged into an on-site pond, which is not allowed because our permit does not permit us to do that. So
there's only been one incident of it.
There were two incidents very close to each other in August.
Okay. Well, I guess that's the
I
answer to my
apologize. I wanted to add to that because we tiptoed around it, but we didn't dive into your question exactly. This is for existing infrastructure. If not one house is built, this problem still exists. If we don't add one more house to the system, we still have a problem getting rid of reclaimed water, treated wastewater during a heavy storm event like a hurricane. That adding houses doesn't really change the fact that we still have a problem. In addition, we've just been notified by the Department of Environmental Protection that we have a consent order now against us. So we're going to be fined $16,000. If we don't fix it within a certain time limit, that goes up pretty significantly. Another question I think somebody asked in the audience was, what is this impact to the water and sewer utility user? And if I'm not mistaken, it's $4 a month. Sorry, Jason Yarbrough, Deputy City Manager.
Okay. Well, answer my question. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I live here in Welland Park, and we have water treatment facilities here, which we do pay of our CDG fees. Citizens of Old Northport do not pay for those facilities. Why we have to pay for the water treatment plant in Old Northport if they don't pay for our facilities?
Well, yeah.
Mike Vulo, I'm the Assistant Director for Operation and Maintenance for the utility. The systems are interconnected. They're not separate systems. And we can send water from the plants here. And for actually up until 2018, all the wastewater that was from Welland Park went to the legacy plant in Northport. Same thing with the water. Water is still pumped here to Welland Park from Myakkahatchee Creek. We have a dedicated commitment with Welland Park that we will always supply 5,600 ERCs, which is about 1 million gallons a day, here from that plant. So it's an interconnected system.
But they do not pay for those facilities. People from the Old Northport do not pay for those facilities. We do pay.
We all pay.
It's what
No, I understand. You live in Welland Park, but people who do not live in Welland Park, they do not pay for those facilities.
They sure do.
It's all one utility system, and all of our utility customers pay the
I
same
understand it's
rate.
one system, but what funding was used to build those facilities?
The developer built our Welland Park wastewater and potable water plants. They donated them, they gave them to the city, and the city, they didn't donate them, they gave them to, transferred them to the city, and the city pays them back out of our tax dollars, all of our tax dollars over the next God knows how many years. Everyone in this city pays their share of everything. Believe me, and your infrastructure, I live here in Welland Park. The infrastructure that is specific to us, our roads, um, our lights, our immediate infrastructure here, we pay as part of our CDDs. If the builders, the developers had not created the CDD and allowed us to pay our CDDs over 30 years, you would have paid $100,000, $200,000 more for your house because that's what happens elsewhere in the country where there aren't CDDs. All of us pay our fair share, including all the legacy Northport citizens pay their fair share. So this belief that Welland Park is the deep pockets for the city of Northport is outrageously untrue. And it's been perpetrated by a handful of people who would prefer not to live here, who are more than welcome to move. The reality is that we all share equally. We're all part of a united city.
Mr. Stoke, you misleading. All the builders' presence out of our pockets. And we know that. And you know that. And please not go into this avenue regarding people who have different opinion. That's not professional.
Everybody's entitled to their opinion.
One more question. This subject. I was wondering if each of the commissioners could, if prioritize each one of these referenda in terms of most important and least important. And please avoid trying to say, oh, they're all equally important, because I don't think anybody here believes that. So if each of you could do that, because there may be some of us out there who may say, we got to get the police station built, or we got to have the water fixed, or we got to have the transfer station. I love having my own water, you know, it doesn't impact me too much. So I'm very interested in how you all would prioritize each one of these referendum in terms of the most important to the least important. Thank you very
Be
much.
happy to go first and then pass it down the line. I believe public safety is the most important thing that we can provide our citizens. If I had to pick of the three of them, I would say public safety and the police headquarters, followed by the wastewater treatment because it's government mandated. We got to fix it. And then the solid waste. But as you said, we wouldn't be asking you to fund these or for the permission to fund them the way we want if we didn't think these were three of the most important projects. So hope I answered your question.
That is indeed an awful question. And I'm sitting here trying to figure it out. And I agree, public safety in our roles as elected officials. But I've got to tell you, I can't separate being able to borrow during a hurricane. I can't choose between that and the police headquarters. I just can't because both of them are so vitally important to our ability to maintain public safety. So I just can't. Um, I guess the wastewater treatment plant for the reasons if we don't fix that, it's going to cost us a lot of money. Never mind, potential impact to the environment. So if you pull my fingernails out, I would have to say that's probably the third. Um, but the transfer station is such a no-brainer. It is going to save us so much money. So when I have my public safety hat on, it's emergency borrowing in the police headquarters. When I have my financial hat on, it's the transfer station, and when I have my government hat on, then it's capital improvements to that wastewater. So, but I wear all three of those at the same time. I am a politician.
Is this on? Okay. Yeah, I was just chronologizing this. My number one priority would be the public safety and that's the police station. Absolutely. Number two would be the emergencies, declared emergencies, because when you're in a pickle, you're grasping for straws. I was the mayor at the time when Ian came through, and just getting resources in, this, that, and the other was very, very difficult. Plus, having all of thinking of all the citizens that were in harm's way and trying to help them. So those are my top two. Um, Three would be just because of the pickle that we're in, also at the wastewater plant. That would be number three. Four would be because I'm counting on you guys because it is a no-brainer. So that's why it's a number four on my list because it definitely needs to happen. Did you hear that, Frank? Okay. And number five would be the having the city clerk and the attorney, move into the district, which it is a plus, but that's last on my list. So that's where I'm at.
Mr. Petro.
I would say it's a good question, but it's a hard question. I would say public safety, and I would equate them in one: emergencies, borrowing for the authority to respond to declared emergencies. And then three, it's reactive. That would be for borrowing authority for wastewater treatment. Four would be waste transfer station. It is very important, but as far as the numbers, I would equate it to four. By no means it's the less important, and the last is removing residency requirements, which, by the way, got changed in 2018, I believe. So before it was not even a requirement, and not to blame the other commission, but I don't know why they did it. But we will. I'm not advocating. I'm saying we are presenting these questions to you, but it will save the city some money, even though it will save because we will have to hire someone else outside of the city.
Commissioner Duval.
A couple of months ago, when I was very new to this position, we had a couple of days of meetings, where we did some strategic planning. And even though it wasn't asked of us to do, there were a whole list of projects. And on my own at home, after one of the days, I prioritized them. And number one at that time, in my mind, was the transfer station. Just because it pays for itself, it's going to make us money. Now, I've heard public safety mentioned. I think the police station is public safety. I think the ability to borrow money for declared emergencies is about public safety. I think wastewater treatment, our utilities as a whole, are about public health and safety. There's not one project here that's not about public health and safety. Now, if I'm really serious about these things, but I'll kind of end on a little joking matter. If you don't like my answers, there's another election in 4 years and you can vote me out. Almost. The problem with that is I'm 75 years old and I'll be 79 then, and I'm not running again. Thank you, folks.
And he's on record, folks. At this point, we can go ahead and, I'm sorry.
Nothing. Wanted to make sure you did public comment before you canceled.
No, that's right. Any general public comment, City Clerk? There is none. Well, we're delighted to have you speak to us and ask us questions. That's what this is for.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm new to the community, fairly new, and I've come to a few of your meetings, and everybody is, very, very involved and want to do their jobs well. So please take this in the way that it's intended, not that as a okay, in the way that it's intended. It's meant good. Okay, the impression that you give when you say, "Oh, our millage rate hasn't changed," is that you didn't change any other ways of getting taxes. Okay, which on your utility bills, they've gone up a couple percentage. Your assessments have gone up. And so it's a misnomer to say that your tax rates haven't gone up. And it offends me that you think, oh, if I just say my millage rate isn't higher, then, everybody thinks that nothing's changed. And that's not true. And when the percentage on the utilities went up, I got very, very upset because I feel like it unfairly hits people that probably can afford it the least. Okay. The home I live in, my electric bill is $57. If I lived in what are they called, a John Pease home or in a trailer or whatever, my electric bill might be $700 during the summer because I don't have good insulation. And so we're unfairly hitting people that have less money to spend, without them even necessarily recognizing that that's what they're doing, that they're paying a higher tax rate. And I'm actually personally offended by that. Not that anybody, everybody has their own opinion, and I'm offended by that. But it also affects your credibility when you say that you haven't raised taxes on people. And so, and again, by having a special election and four of the five things on there are all about money, and a lot of people aren't even here during May of the year. They live other places. It gives the impression of trying to conceal it and make it slide under the table. Now, because I've seen all of you guys before, I don't believe that's your intention. But from an outsider coming in, I'm not sure that that's the kind of persona that you want to present. And on that note, I'm going to sit myself down and I swear I'm never talking in another meeting again because I think I'm going to tremble all the way home.
Never say
Well,
never.
that's right. And you sort of bit off a lot there, and you know, I don't think, at least I don't want to believe that any of us here or the city government has ever said that, you know, the fact that we kept our property tax rate flat meant that it wasn't costing everybody more money to live. I mean, the county appraises up our properties pretty much every year. The costs of providing basic services go up every year. Everything across this nation has and world has gone up every year. So, from a personal standpoint, I would never want anybody to think I'm trying to tell people the cost of living has not gone up. We just try to do it in the most efficient and well managed way. And while you make a good point about consumption taxes or user fees can potentially impact poor and middle class people more than wealthier people. You own $1 million house, why shouldn't you pay through the teeth, pay high property taxes? There's something to that, but at the same time, consumption taxes, user taxes, we have a little more control over. And so it's not a perfect system by any means, and there has to be that balance. When the county appraises up our property values and we're all writing a bigger check for our property taxes, even if our millage rate stays flat, we're paying more for our properties. Just that simple. So if the city were to raise the millage rate on top of the assessed increases, it'd be pretty onerous. I think we might hear from a lot of citizens. So there's a balance between consumption tax and property tax. But make no mistake, it all comes out of our pockets. I agree with you.
our millage rate hasn't gone up, and it does give a different impression perhaps than you think that it does. And that's just from an ordinary citizen giving her opinion. And you can obviously disagree, and you do, but
You know
it's
what?
okay if I have mine as
You
well.
bet. And if you feel that way, other people feel that way. So it's good that we bear it in mind so we can, as we communicate with the city and with our citizens, that maybe we transmit that and communicate it a little better.
Stop saying it.
Let's say it. Other than that, we have, oh, I'm sorry.
Um, Ma'am, you hit on a personal issue with me. When you talk about, you know, electric rates and sometimes I'm not going to be very popular with some of the things I say, but I too think about those people that don't have a $35, $50 electric bill. And the city of Northport, on your electric bill, gets a franchise fee. They also get a tax. Well, I think that tax is too high because it is a regressive tax. It affects those that can afford it the least, the most. And we're going to kind of tell tales out of school here. Uh, in the last couple of years, the city of Northport's tax on the electric bills has gone up considerably. And I was against that. And I had discussions with our city manager. And I said, I'd like to see that tax lowered. And he said, well, if you lower that, then how are you going to replace that money? And at that moment, I did not have an answer. But I want you to pay attention in the next 3 or 4 or 6 months because there is an answer coming. The utility, FPL, is asking to be able to raise rates, not just this year, but for the next 2 or 3 years. Well, if they raise our rates, that means, at the tax rate we charge in this city, we're going to be making more money. So in order to help citizens, what if we could lower? They raise their rate, we lower our tax rate, even by 1%. We're still going to be making the same amount of money. In other words, we're replacing that money, but we're helping those people that can't afford high rates. And that's something that's going to be coming down the pike. That's going to be an issue coming up. We have to wait until we see what the state allows FPL to do with their rates. But we will be having a discussion. That's my promise.
Well, folks, I have to say, appreciate everybody coming out here. You asked a lot of really good questions. And, I really wish that the other 93 or 4,000 people in the city were as interested and involved and engaged as you. And it's not to say that they aren't. They just have a lot on their plate too, raising families, going to work every day. We really appreciate you coming out here and challenging us and asking us these questions because they help us better understand where you all are coming from. It helps us better refine the decisions we make. And make no mistake, we really try to do the best for the most all the time. We know our decisions cannot make everybody happy here, but we do endeavor to do the best for the most. We are you. We live here just like you. We pay taxes just like you. We care about all the same things that you do. And so I really do thank you all for coming out here. We all thank you all for coming out here. Spread the word. We have one more referendum town hall on the 24th of this month over at the STC and 6 o'clock. encourage people to come out. If they've got questions, if they've got concerns, come out. It's important. You know, you all want us to ask you and involve you. And, you know, along with voting comes a responsibility as well as a right. So thanks again, and have a nice evening, everybody.